Welcome everyone to Junior Future Planning Night for the class of 2026. That is right, all of your students are juniors if you are here attending this now. Yep, you've made it this far. So we're here to kind of help you guys through the next couple steps. We're excited to have you here. I'm here with two of my fellow guidance counselors, Stacy Ross and Sherry Turner. You guys can give a little wave if you want. I think we're the only ones visible on the screen anyways, and again, I'm Krista Urquhart. They are going to be chiming in throughout the rest of the presentation this evening, but I'm going to kick us off tonight. So before we get started, there's just a few things I wanted to kind of go over. Tonight's presentation is really meant to just share a brief overview with you of all the basic information regarding future planning. So this can include various options, college, community college, trade school, prep school. We're going to go over some of these options with you in more detail tonight. I believe Ms. Turner put a copy of the slide deck in the chat feature, so you can access it there if you're someone who kind of likes to tick along and follow along with us this evening. We're also recording the presentation, so we will be able to upload that and post it to the guidance website, and we will probably put it in our Google Classrooms as well. I'm sure questions are going to arise throughout this evening's presentation, so we're going to ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask those questions throughout the presentation. We're going to collect those questions and answer them at the end of the presentation for you, just so we can kind of move along. But to access that Q&A, if you're not sure or unfamiliar, at the bottom right of the screen, there's a little triangle, square, circle character down there. You can just click on that and you can ask the questions that way. If you have specific questions about your student in particular, any questions that you have regarding their process or timelines or anything like that, we encourage you to reach out after the presentation to your student's guidance counselor. And right now up on the screen, we have the breakdown of the alphabet. So at this point, many of you probably already know who your child's guidance counselor is, but if you are still needing like a refresher, the breakdown is right there. It is broken down by alphabet. And we ask that you make an appointment with them specifically, just because they're going to have more specific information about your child individually. Next week, we are going to be going into the biology classes for all of the juniors to give a very similar presentation as we are sharing with you this evening. And it's the first of two sessions. So we're going in next week, and then we will go in again in April to give a more detailed and kind of like a further along timeline of what to expect as we head into the summer and into the fall of next year. So that will be happening next week. After that meeting is typically when we encourage students to reach out to meet with us individually one-on-one to start beginning about their own specific plans in the future and their process. And we encourage you to be a part of those meetings if that feels appropriate and if that's part of what you want as the process. So definitely coordinating with your child to schedule a time with the counselor together. And I think that's it for like housekeeping stuff. I just wanted to make sure I touched base on all of those things before we kind of jumped right into the slides. So tonight's presentation, just jump right into it. We're going to talk about various post-secondary options, and we'll get into more details about each. We're also going to talk about the junior year college process and all of the ins and outs of that. We're going to speak a little bit about our software program called Naviance, which if you have students who have gone through this process and the college admissions process in the past, you're probably familiar with the software program. So we're going to continue to share more information about that. And then we are lucky enough with us at the tail end of the presentation tonight to have a couple college representatives with us this evening. So we have a representative from UMass Amherst, we have a representative from Brandeis, and from Northeastern University. So they will be joining us at the tail end of the presentation, giving a little spiel about each of their respective schools. and also providing an opportunity for you to use that chat feature to ask any questions that they might have that you might have for them as well. Um, let's see, Miss Turner, you can go the next. So, if we're thinking about post to secondary options in planning, um, there are various options for students. Prep school is one of them that have talked and worked with students around in the past. Also, gap years. Gap years is something we're seeing students take advantage of more often, especially after COVID. But even just recently, more students are questioning what they want to do and kind of where their road might go, and so a gap year option has become more and more popular. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Career training programs, also known as trade schools, you may have heard. So we're going to talk about options there, employment, students heading right into the workforce, and also military. And finally, we're going to delve into the college process, college searches, testing, applications, all that good stuff. So now we're sure where to start. You might be jumping on tonight thinking like, okay, just like let's jump right in. I need to know when applications are due. When do I start my Common App? All that good stuff, especially if you've been through the process before. But some of you might be joining us tonight thinking, I'm not even sure where to start. We're just starting to have these conversations, and we're here to tell you that's okay. That's what we're here to support you with. Every counselor, and I know I can speak for the ones who are not here with us this evening on the call, that we all are here to help your child through post-secondary planning, no matter what that looks like. And so one thing we wanted to make sure to share with you, you may or may not be aware that in part of our 10th grade curriculum with students, we as a guidance department go into their positive decision-making classes, which is their PE course for sophomore year. And we do two lessons around some resume building and then also some career and interest exploration. So that is something that we did with them last year. We did it all through College Board, which is a company and name you are probably familiar with. They are the hub for all of the SAT, PSAT, AP Central. So they also have a feature called the Big Future, which is a really great, neat tool in helping students figure out kind of what careers might be good fits for them. And that's all based on personality surveys and career interest surveys. So we've gone into their classes and done some work with them around that, and then had them like kind of do a little scavenger hunt to think about what careers might be a good fit for them. It's been fun to go in and do that with them because I think some of the answers that they get are really unique and funny, and having them to try to like figure out how to tweak it and think about it in a different lens and from a different perspective kind of is a real fun part of what we do. So that has been fun. You can ask them about it if they can remember back to that last year. And if you have more questions about it, reach out to us, let us know, and we can help you guide you in what direction to go for that. So, prep school is one of the first options that we talk about. Typically, we see students going into a prep school if they're an athlete. Sometimes they're taking an extra year to kind of improve their academics, reapply to schools that might be a bit more challenging for them, but they want to go there for athletics. But students who just feel like they maybe need one more year of high school, that jumping right into college isn't for them, but they know that they want college as kind of their end goal. We recommend getting going on interviews for this process, and application deadlines for that usually tend to be in early January. So along the lines of like regular admissions decisions for students. And they will need definitely letters of recommendation from their English and math teachers, and all of the guidance counselors. We'll talk about this more later in the presentation, but we all write letters of recommendation for our students. As I mentioned before, gap year is another program or option for students when they are thinking about post and secondary plans. We actually have a lot of students who will go through the whole college application process and then decide still that maybe they're not ready to go in that direction yet, and they want to take a gap year to kind of figure things out first. So what we encourage students to do with that gap year is do some exploration. It might be work, it might be a program, it could be city year, it could be employment, it could be community service, traveling. I've had students do internships or work with work at different schools doing research with other professors, or it could just be kind of figuring things out through your work experiences. So if college is on the horizon, you want to make sure your student goes through the process even if they are considering a gap year. But these are some of the websites that we've referred students to check out. Gap Year Solutions is a great one. It is owned by a BHS alum, and she often hosts college fairs. I think our gap year fairs, we're going to get to that information in a few minutes. There it is. So there's a couple options if you think your student might be interested in taking a gap year, or if that might be an option for them, even if it's not their first option. There are some virtual fairs that are coming up. You can see on Thursday, February 13th and Wednesday, March 5th. You can go right to these websites and register there. And then, as I mentioned, Gap Year Solutions is run by Catherine Stedever. She is the founder of it, and she is also, as I said, her children went to BHS. So that evening of February 11th, she will be hosting an information session about gap years and their program and what they offer. Lots of students, especially as of late, are considering their options. Sometimes for them, different factors come into play when they're thinking about their trajectory, and they opt to do alternative options instead of college. And so what that might look like for them are some trade schools or career training programs. We've had lots of students attend schools like the Peterson School or Minuteman Tech. Those are great avenues for students if they're thinking of going into a trade. So maybe plumbing, construction, electrician, great options for students if they're hands-on and that's a route that they want to go, a direction that they want to go in. And so we share some of that information with them when we go in and chat with them, but also some information here for you all. We also know a lot of students like to jump right into the workforce and maybe get training through there. I was just speaking with a student recently who is in the food industry business, and he graduated a few years ago, and now he's doing really well and worked his way up in the line chef. He loves to cook, and so that's kind of where he's at right now. And he's done really well for himself and is doing really great. So that's just an example of one route a student might take. And then the military is another option we've had students pursue in the past as well. And so we always make sure students are aware of all of their options. And now I am going to pass the torch over to Ms. Sherry Turner, who's going to begin talking about that fourth option of the college process.
Okay, welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to try to give you an overview of a whole bunch of information. It will be, as we mentioned in the beginning, this will be posted online, so you can refer back to this as well. It'll be on the guidance webpage, from the Belmont High School site, as well as it is also in the chat right now. Okay, so just a few things to reiterate. We talked about how we are going into the junior guidance class. The guidance is going into the junior biology classes, okay, next week and then again in April. And we encourage you to set up meetings or have your students set up meetings with you or without you. Either way is okay with us. Anytime after the February classes. We also, right after that, we roll right into the course selection period. So students are going to be receiving their recommendations. Guidance will be meeting with students the entire month of March. Just some things to keep in mind during that process. You know, you want your student to select classes that they are interested in, especially as seniors. There's a lot more electives that they can take. But you also want to make sure that they still have a balance and they're not, completely overloading themselves, with too many courses that are going to require too much additional time outside. The college process is like having another class, the amount of time it takes. We do encourage our juniors to try to start those applications, towards the end of the summer, just to kind of get a little bit of an advance on the process. And so it doesn't make senior year so stressful. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but you also want to look at what other things they're doing outside of school, extracurricular activities. Do they have a job? Do they have other, other responsibilities that need to, get factored into the amount of time that they have to do homework, and ensure that they can still get an adequate amount of sleep at night. If your student is already in an AP class this year, they will have already created a College Board account. If they have not yet taken an AP class and they plan to register for the SATs, we do encourage them to get on that, set up their College Board account. And I'm going to talk about the testing in just a few slides. But just to give you an overview as far as the college admission process and the different types of deadlines there are. So the earliest deadline that we see is October 15th. It's for some of the Southern schools. But typically like an early deadline would be November 1st, November 15th. And then the regular timeline is not going to be until January 1st. Okay, so there's something called early action. Okay, early action allows students to apply to a school early, so November 1st, November 15th, and hear back from the school on the earlier side. So that could be hearing back in December. It also could be hearing back at the end of January. UMass Amherst recently just sent out their acceptances and their decisions. So anywhere between December and the end of January typically for early action. There's also something called early action single choice or restrictive early action. And that is, there will be some private schools that have that choice. Harvard is one. There are a bunch of others, and they allow you only to apply to one private school early action. You can still apply to a number of public, universities. So you can still apply to UMass Amherst. You could still apply to University of Michigan. At the same time. Okay, so early action, both of those first two choices are not binding. You hear early, but you are not, you don't have to commit to actually attend the school. You're just going to hear early. So it's a nice option if your student is, ready to send things out. Early decision, okay, is something where you and the student are actually making you're making a commitment to, you can only do this to one school. And you are making a commitment to attend the school if they accept you. Okay, so you are not going to be able to compare financial aid packages because the early decision 1, which will tend to fall anywhere from November 1st to November 15th, you're going to get an answer back typically in December. There is something also called early decision 2, which allows students to try again with a different school for early decision 2 if they allow that. And that deadline is January for any early decision 2 schools. Tufts has an ED2. There's a bunch of different schools that also offer ED2. Okay. If you are applying early decision, you can apply to other schools still early action. However, once you hear from your early decision school, if you are accepted, you have to withdraw those other applications, even if you have not heard an answer back yet. And I know that can be hard for some students. Sometimes they're like, oh, but I want to know if I got in or not. But when the student signs the agreement, the parent and guardian signs the agreement, and the guidance counselor also signs the agreement saying that if you are accepted, you will attend. So it is a binding document. The only way to get out of that would be if you had gone onto their website and tried their financial aid calculator, and the number that it gave you was astronomically different than the number it actually comes out to be from that school. But we don't need to talk about that now. We can talk about that individually next year if you have questions. Rolling admissions just means that the colleges will be reviewing applications as they get them. It tends to be better to apply earlier on the rolling schools than later because they will fill up their spots. And once they're filled, they will close them. Penn State is one example of a rolling admissions school. And then your regular deadlines tend to be from January 1st to January 15th. They can be February 1st, February 15th, all the way up until March 1st for your regular schools. And then open enrollment schools are community colleges. They don't necessarily have a deadline, so they will continue to review applications as they receive them. One great thing about Massachusetts that's just recently started was that they are offering free tuition for community college if you have not been to school yet. So it's a great option for students to consider. You can attend community college for a couple of years and then transfer for your to finish up, your degree at a 4-year school, save yourself a lot of money. There definitely are more and more students looking into this option, and it's a great option that right now we have in our state. Okay, so standardized testing. Okay, unfortunately and fortunately, well, I will say unfortunately, probably speaking on behalf of the guidance staff, some schools are adding back the requirement for standardized testing. Not all, there are still plenty of schools that are test optional. We have on this page, we do have a website called fairtest.org, and they will list all of the schools that are test optional, but a bunch of the Ivies added requirements for standardized testing back. So that is something that will be back again for next year. SAT versus ACT, just a few little minor differences. The SAT is now online. ACT, there's still a paper version. You will have a choice to take the paper version or the online. SAT is still more aptitude based, more data analysis, historical text, multi-step math problems. They are allowing the calculators built right into the test online. So that is something that changed from like a year ago. ACT is more content based. The math is all multiple choice, a little bit more geometry. You can, again, you also use a calculator throughout. The ACT, you have less time per question. So if your student's a faster reader, sometimes the ACT can be beneficial. I will show you a couple slides. We do have some options coming up in February for students to actually try out both the SAT and the ACT through one of our test prep organizations. So that's something they can try to see which one do they prefer. In addition, there's something called super scoring. So most colleges and universities are still allowing super scoring. And what that is if you say you take your one SAT in March and then you take another one in June, but your higher ELA score was in March, you can use that. And then your higher math was in June. You have to send both test scores, or you have to self-report the test scores, but they will super score them and put the highest together. So that can benefit the student. In order to register for these tests, you have to go on collegeboard.org for SAT or ACT student for ACT. If English was not the student's first language, some of the universities are requiring, regardless of how many years they have taken English, some of the schools are still requiring them to submit either the TOEFL test or the Duolingo. Duolingo is much cheaper version. So if that applies to your student, just make sure they look at that in the details as far as the admissions requirements. Okay, so that's just a little quick overview as far as the testing goes. Timeline-wise, some juniors have taken an SAT or an ACT already. Also, many juniors have not yet. The dates that are coming up for the SAT are March, May, June, and then there's also August and September. The only test date that Belmont High School is a test site for is March. So they will need to, when they go online, if they're signing up for any of the other months, they would definitely want to go on sooner rather than later to try to secure a site and a seat at one of the nearby schools. ACT, we are a site, Belmont High School is only the site for April. Okay, so if they choose to take it in any of those other months, they need to select a different town. Okay, a couple of things to keep in mind for that. If your student has been approved for testing accommodations or they receive accommodations in school, they should reach out to either their special education liaison or their guidance counselor just to make sure that they have applied for those accommodations, because that is something that is separate. College Board or ACT has to approve the student to receive those accommodations. It's not a guarantee just because they receive it at school. Okay, so I just want to back up again. So as far as the timeline, so juniors can take it this spring, over the summer. If they're applying to schools for regular decision, they can take it again in the fall. There will be September, October, November, December SAT dates. So there's lots of time to take them. And typically I would say most students take it at least a couple times. All right. Okay, so just a little bit more as far as the college process. We talked a lot about the testing dates already. It's early to, obviously start thinking about, is my student going to apply early action? Are they going to apply early decision? Will they apply regular? But that is something, to consider because it will impact, possibly their testing timeline when they're going to register for their test. So just keep that in mind. I would also say, just advice-wise, as far as should they take it sooner rather than later, it really depends on when are they going to have time to study and prepare a little bit for the test rather than just go in there and take it. Let them have some time to do some type of prep, whether it's, through an testing agency, on their own. Khan Academy online offers free test prep resources too. Okay, so again, reminder, they should definitely set up a meeting with us, with their guidance counselor, sometime after the junior meetings next week. And anytime, we're happy to meet with them anytime from then through June, through our last day of school, obviously, with any of us. And you are welcome to join them as parent or guardians. If your student is someone who is thinking about competing in D1 or D2 athletics in college, there's a few extra things. They should definitely talk to their coach, about what schools might be a good match for them, as well as the NCAA eligibility center, and sending SAT scores. So there's a few extra things. When your student was in 10th grade, we had them create a resume in their Naviance account and ask them to keep track of their activities, try to go back, remember what you've done. It's a good time now to kind of add to that if they haven't been back on that recently, because when they're filling out their applications, they're going to be having to, let the admissions reps know, I've done these activities. These are the honors and awards that I've received. So if they can keep a running tally now, that would be great. Okay, so here's a couple of those opportunities that are coming up. So Saturday, February 1st, this is an online testing opportunity to try out the SAT. And then on February 8th, there's another one for the ACT. You do have to register here, so that link is here. And then you are welcome to set up a time to review with the folks over at Revolution Prep to review the results if you would like. That's up to you. So that information is there. And it's also been in Isaac's newsletters as well. And then at the end of February, we're going to be having another little webinar with Drew Halprin, who is great, who is from Summit Educational Group, and he will go into a lot more detail about the testing, the differences between the tests, the best ways to prepare for them, as well as the role of the testing through admissions process. So that is on February 25th at 7 o'clock. And the link is here, and that will also be added to the newsletter as well, and our guidance page. Okay, so Common Application. The Common Application is an application that is accepted by over 1,000 different schools. So students will fill out the Common Application, and has two main parts. One part is what we call the main section, that everything that they fill out in that main section is sent to any school that they apply to that's part of the Common App. It includes family information, activities, and that main essay. Okay, and then the second part of it is something called the supplement section, which is different for every school. The supplement section will not be available for next year's seniors until this August. Okay, so if a student decides to go in July and start working on their Common Application, they can. They just want to stick to the main section for that. And then come August, they will have the individual supplemental questions for each of the schools. If the school is not part of the Common Application, then the student would just go to the school's website, and they will have a link to their own application, which they can apply right on their website. But the Common App is really nice. It streamlines things. It makes it a lot easier for students to apply to different schools as they go through it. Another really important resource that we have put together that is in both the students' Google Classroom as well as on the guidance webpage is called the Junior Folder. It is filled with all kinds of documents from the slide decks that we've had from this presentation. The junior bio class presentations will be in there as well. Timelines, a lot more detailed website information for post-secondary options, as well as some wonderful, I think these are great. We have some helpful life skills for after high school and academic skills. And these are things definitely as parents look at these and see how many of these your student has maybe not yet fully acquired independently, and work on them in the next year while they're still at home with you. So some good skills on there. Student questionnaire is something that the guidance counselors ask students to fill out to help us with our recommendation that we will write for them in the fall. And then we also have an optional parent guardian brag sheet that you can fill out and give to us if you would like. We welcome them. You know your student best, and you lots of times will have additional things that you think might be great to highlight that we would love to learn and hear about. So please feel free to fill those out. There's a teacher rec sheet. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Essay writing tips. We have the Common App essay questions from this past year are listed in here. Typically, they don't tend to change too much. Sometimes they'll add a new one from year to year, and the new ones will eventually be out soon as well. But those are listed, as well as a great little vocab sheet that just kind of talks about different terminology as far as the college process goes, which can be very helpful. Okay, so recommendations. So teacher recommendations, we are going to be asking juniors to only ask 2 teachers for recommendations this next year. The recommendations are done by our staff they're not done during school. They have to do them above and beyond on the weekends and the evenings. It can be a lot for, there are certain teachers that teach junior classes that get asked a lot more than others. So we're asking everyone to only ask 2. It does not have to be someone from a math or science or social studies and English. Lots of times people think, oh, it has to be. There may be a couple schools out there that ask specifically for that. If your student is going to major in math or science, then yes, definitely a good idea maybe to try to get a math or science teacher. But typically it's really just ideally who knows the student best, which teachers from what subjects. And they can check in with their guidance counselor about that as well, as far as who they might want to ask. It is the student's responsibility to reach out to the teachers. We encourage them to do that from any time from March on. Some teachers will have lotteries because they have so many students that will ask. So they want to have a backup in case they do not get selected for that lottery. And then, as I mentioned, the guidance counselor will be writing a recommendation as well. Outside recommendations. So is it okay to send those as long as the school allows you to send them? Some schools may say no more than 2 recommendations. Other schools may say you can send up to 4. And then there's even some schools that say we don't want any. So that's something that the student has to keep track of and only ask, a teacher to write them if they can actually send the letters. We don't want to waste anybody's time. All right, excuse me. Okay, going to visit. We live in an area where there are so many colleges and universities right nearby. 3 of the admissions reps will be here tonight, so you can head on down to Brandeis to check out their campus. You can head right over to Northeastern, check out a nice large, school that's right in the city, or you can take a little trip out to UMass Amherst and see what a large university looks like out a little bit further away. Try to when you do go visit, definitely sign up for the tours. Let them know that you are there and you're interested. Ideally, it's great if you can go when school is in session. Take advantage, though, if you can't, of any virtual visits as well. Okay, so we say relax and enjoy the summer before your senior year, but we do know it is also stressful. And we do ask to try to make some time for the college work on your essay and that common application, because it will save them a lot of stress come the fall. Ms. Ross is going to shortly speak to you about Naviance and let you know how you can use the information that we have in our Naviance database to help refine your search. And we encourage you to continue to visit and tour more schools. If the student is going to be applying to any art, music, or theater program, they may have additional deadlines of portfolios being due or auditions that have to happen. So they really have to keep, just a close eye on that. I always encourage, students to set up a big giant Google Doc with all the different columns for deadlines for the financial aid documents, deadlines for if it's a portfolio, or do I have to have, is there an interview? Do I need to do that? So those are all things that they need to keep track of. Real quick, a little overview of the financial aid process. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And if you're using this, it is going to be required at any of the schools that they apply to. You can fill it out next year. You should be able to fill it out beginning October 1st. You do have to create your own little ID and PIN prior to that to being able to fill that form out. So the FAFSA will be required if you're applying for any aid. And then there's also something called the CSS profile. And that is an additional financial aid document that is required by many private schools in addition to the FAFSA. It asks a lot more detailed questions, but you want to make sure, and again, those have deadlines. On College Board, it does list out exactly which schools require the profile. So just want to make sure you really pay close attention to those deadlines, because sometimes if you're applying early to a school, you could have financial aid forms due December 1st. There are different deadlines. So keep that in mind. A great resource is MEFA, Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. They have great online resources, and they also hold a lot of webinars, not just in the fall. They have a lot in the fall, but they have them throughout the year, and for all different topics. So definitely check them out as well. And I'm going to turn it over. So yes, we know it's very overwhelming, but try to enjoy it. Try to help your student enjoy it as well. The time that they can put in now into learning about and looking at different options for themselves, it will pay off in the future, and remind them it's their, it's their path, and you want to find, some place that fits and matches them. I always say, it's your own path. Try not to listen to your friends and everyone talking in the cafeteria about different things. You want to find the school that's right for you. And there are so many different colleges and universities out there that your student can be very happy at. And there are many, so it's not just one. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to Miss Ross to continue on our Naviance.
Hi, welcome everyone. Glad everyone's here. And I think right now, if everyone just maybe if you can hear my voice, just take a deep breath in and just let it all out. This is a lot of information. It's quite a process if it's the first time you're going through it with your student. We know that. And as Ms. Turner and Ms. Urquhart have mentioned, we are here to support you and your students through it. And I really do want to emphasize, as Ms. Turner just kind of mentioned, that this learning how to do a process like this will pay off later, because your students eventually will be going out into the world and they will have to find jobs on their own. They'll have to find apartments on their own and all of that stuff. So, it is a good learning process, and it is confusing. And that, again, we're all here to support the kids going through that. So I'm talking a little bit this evening about a specific software program that we use, which is called Naviance. Many high schools use this program, and it is very specific to help students with the college search. And the data that's in Naviance is pretty, it ties into Belmont High School. So there's comparative things that students can see that can help them view trends and things like that with colleges that other students have applied to from Belmont. So again, it is specific to Belmont. We as guidance counselors have access to see what the students are doing in their accounts. Parents also get accounts, and Mrs. Kepa has sent out emails to parents. So you might already have your account. If not, maybe search through your emails a little bit, and if you don't find it, just contact Mrs. Kepa and she can help you out with that. And the parents have a view portal into what their students are doing, but you can't control adding colleges and things like that. Also, your students have their accounts, and they can log into their account and share the information with you to do a search at home. So the features in Naviance. Mr. If you do the next slide. There's a few kind of functions in Naviance in terms of the college search. There's just a general section where it's about me, and that's where the student can go in and locate their GPA that will be listed in Naviance. We'll input the standardized test scores. It's also a place to continue working on their resume, which we highly encourage. And there are a couple of tabs. One is for careers with career exploration, and then also just like college venue searches. And so the activity that they did during the positive decision-making classes last year correlates to this stuff. So hopefully it has given them some insight and some ideas into things that they might be interested in. So on the next slide, we talk about some of the features of Naviance and what it can help you do. So you can do general searches and click into, like I have on my other computer, I'm logged into another school taking a look at the tabs. There's so much information that you can get when you go in here and you go into a specific college, and we'll give you an overview with a lot of information that will tell you like an average net price of the college, and you can click in to take a look at your family income and see what that might be. It tells you the graduation rate for the school, which can be helpful for some students to look at, acceptance rates. And these are general, these are not specific to Belmont, they're just more like over generalized areas. And then deadlines will be featured with each college as well. And so, I mean, you can really do a lot with Naviance in terms of getting research and taking a look at different information. There's just so much stuff to learn. And so we'll get into taking a look at, we'll do this with the students this in the next coming couple of them in the February and April activities that we do with them, and encouraging them to go into Naviance if they're looking at going to college. Doing a super match is super helpful. Basically what you do is you just go through different criteria. You say there's a location, and then it goes through academics, admissions, like student life. You can put all sorts of things into a search, and then you'll get a list back. And what we really recommend with the students, and I think it might be on the next slide, is definitely doing, clicking on a school that you're interested in, that the student's interested in, and putting it into the colleges that are on their like list. And there are a few reasons for doing that. One is it will just start creating like a good list of schools. And we don't have the slide right now, but we'll get to it, but I can just talk about it anyway. So once the students start creating a list of schools that they like, it gives them like really like good visual informatics of deadlines for that school. It will also give the delivery type of the application, which is helpful for students to start planning ahead. The majority of schools at this point are on the Common App, which is really helpful for students because they just do one basic component of an application, and then they just do supplemental parts for all of the individual questions that the schools will have. So that is a very helpful way for students to start taking a look at information. When you further explore Naviance and you start adding schools to your list, you can start going into what's called like the college match, the college compare, and the Naviance software will start generating information for students on ideas of different schools. It will start then also generating information on schools that students with a similar academic profile have applied to. And then they just sort of get into these trends of different schools. And there's also something called the scattergrams, which are really, really kind of neat to take a look at. And this is where the information gets super specific for Belmont High School, where there's a graph. As you can see here, we do it where the horizontal line is the average GPA score of students who've applied to that school from Belmont. The vertical line is the index of whichever test that you're putting in there. And if the student has both of those things, then, and it's really hard to see in this one, but there's like a little circle with like a face in it, and that's the student. So it's a good way for the students to take a look at how they might compare getting into that school based on trends from past years of Belmont. Another feature when you're in the scattergrams and you're taking a look at those, like right above that in the software, they do bar graphs, which I think are really kind of neat to look at. And we have data from like the past 5 years. And it will say like the amount of students, the number of students in that year who applied to that school from Belmont, the number that were accepted, and then the number that were attended. It's informatics, and data-driven students really like looking at that. And I think it's really kind of, it is a good thing to take a look at, but it doesn't like necessarily prohibit you from applying to school. But there are trends, obviously, in admissions, and, different high schools sometimes fare better at different colleges with acceptance rates. Also, a lot of it depends on how many students actually do go there. But there's a lot of things in Naviance to look at, and encourage students to really get into it and dive into it, explore and have fun with it. That is my key thing that I ask students all the time, especially in these junior meetings. I will say, who thinks this process is fun? And I get a lot of blank stares, and I just try to remind them, like Ms. Turner was saying at the beginning of this little section too, that it should be a fun time for them. They're starting to do something for themselves and looking at things that interest them. And I call it the horse blinders too. It's like, it's good to get information from other people, but again, like the chit chat that's all around you, everyone's doing their own thing. Do your own thing, focus on what really makes you excited about going to a school, and find a fit that's good for you. We actually had a panel of students at our course selection day last week talking to students, and it's 5 alum from different colleges, and they kind of really reiterated the stuff that we have said to them for years of like, really just find your own path. And they said, that in hindsight, like doing that was really super helpful for them, and they're at places that are good to be at. So our next slide just talks a little bit more about different resources in looking at schools. There's a ton of websites that students can go to do some information searching on what students who go to certain schools say about the certain schools. So like niche is really neat to go into. I mean, they get into everything, and like down to like the dining halls, like, which that's an important component. You know what I mean? Like a lot of kids want to have food experiences that are good, and that's, it's a holistic process. There's a lot of different things to consider when your students are taking a look at this. So, and again, we definitely encourage students to have meetings with us individually after we do those February meetings, and parents, you're welcome to join. If you can't physically get into the school, we can definitely get you in on a virtual call as well. So I think right now we might be turning to, our question and answers. I'm going to turn things back over to Ms. Urquhart, who is our little MC of the evening.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. So again, I think I loved how Ms. Ross started that whole spiel of just taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out, because it is a lot of information. But again, just reinforcing the message to you all that we're here to support you. There's going to be lots of questions that come up. Please feel free to email us, get in touch with us, set up times to meet with us. We really want to make sure that you're getting your questions answered, which kind of brings us to the next portion of this evening. So you may have seen a few faces trickle into the meeting as we were speaking. And so we have some college and university representatives with us this evening. We have received a few questions that we're going to answer towards the end of the presentation after we have some time with our representatives. So I don't want you to think that those questions will go unanswered. We will stay on and answer some more questions. But in the meantime, I'd love to introduce our panel of college reps. So if you all want to show your faces, you're welcome to. If they're here. Awesome. Hello. So we have Isabella Snyder from UMass Amherst. We have Zaraya Guyton from Northeastern University, and we have Lillian Lin from Brandeis University. And so I think what we'll probably do first is just have you each do a little intro, give a little spiel about your respective schools, and then we have some questions for you guys that were generated prior to this evening, and we'll just kind of start there. Does that sound okay? Anybody feel like they want to jump in and go first?
I can, if you guys can hear me, y'all. I don't know why my camera is not working, so apologies in advance. I'm going to play with it as we go along. But hello, everyone. My name is Bella Snyder. I am a first-year admissions counselor from the University of Massachusetts. I cover the general Boston area, and I also work on our access and outreach team.
I can go. Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Zaria Guyton, Senior Assistant Director for AppEval at Northeastern University. I do work with students in Georgia as well as in Maryland. I am filling in for one of my colleagues, Aaliyah Maston, who works with you all. But I also have worked extensively with students in the Boston, honestly, in the entire state, but in the Boston area. So, very familiar, but looking forward to answering your questions. Thanks.
Great.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm really excited to be here with you all. My name is Lily. I'm from Brandeis University. I'm an assistant director of admissions over there. I oversee Connecticut, New Mexico, and Arizona. So I'm also filling in for a colleague, but grew up in the Boston area. So really familiar with kind of applications from this area. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. Did any of you have anything you want to just share as far as like your school specifically, or did you want to just jump right in with questions? If you prepared something, we don't want to not have you share that, but if you would just want to jump in with the questions, that's totally great.
I think questions are good.
Okay, great. All right. So we have a series of questions from parents, families, students. So I think a big topic that comes up for our students and families is around test scores and schools being test optional. And so the first question we have is if your school is test optional and your student does not submit testing scores, can this negatively affect their potential admission?
Okay. Well, I'll just say quickly that it's, of course, this is a really great question to ask overall, and I know any schools that you're applying to will be a good question to ask specifically. But I think overall, I can say consistently that not submitting your scores is not going to be a detriment to your application. I always try to make sure students know that we're not trying to trick you. There's no gray areas with that policy. Hopefully, students feel empowered to make the decision that they feel is best for them. Of course, it'll be great to consult any middle 50% ranges if students are looking to consider submitting any testing. But if you are someone who would like to leave your scores out, you should certainly feel empowered to do so, but also check, of course, like at least for Northeastern, we're test optional. There's nothing that you have to do in place of not submitting your scores, but I know other schools could be different. I know the school I applied to, I had to answer some short answer questions. I did do test optional, but I think it's always good to double check, see if there's anything extra that you may need to do in place of it. And if you don't, that is completely fine. Look at the rest of your application and maybe weigh a little bit more heavily on your rigor or anything else. So just keep that in mind, but at least for Northeastern, we don't.
Yeah, at UMass Amherst, we are test optional as well. This does not affect students if you do choose to submit a test score. One thing that I always encourage students to do is if you have a 4.0 GPA, you're sitting at this perfect GPA, right? And you maybe bombed your SATs. I would encourage you to not submit those scores because those will negatively affect you, right? But if you're sitting on the opposite side of that spectrum, if your GPA is struggling a little bit, but you got a perfect ACT or SAT score, I strongly encourage you to submit those scores. But to answer the question in a pretty blunt way is not submitting your scores will absolutely not hurt you at UMass Amherst.
Yeah, I would echo what's kind of already been said. Not submitting your test scores, we won't automatically assume that means you failed the SAT. So nothing kind of on that end. So if you, again, feel like you don't want to submit your SAT scores or your ACT scores or just don't feel like testing, that really is your decision as you're preparing your application.
Great. Thank you so much. Jumping into the next question, if a student applied to your school through ED, for those of you who have it, and the financial aid package that was sent to them was not in line with what the school's website or financial aid calculator predicted, what happens with the ED agreement? Is there a possibility for them to get out of it, or is it still held tightly?
So I can say I work closely actually with those students who are applying ED to Northeastern and are admitted and are questioning the finances because maybe yeah, of course, when they may have filled out the net price calculator, as we know with the net price calculator, you get what you put into it, of course, and maybe the numbers may look a little bit different and what you thought was a possibility may not be the case at this point. And I like to work closely with students. I work alongside financial aid to see what are the possibilities. And of course, when it comes to financial reasons, that is something that will hold close because we don't want to also bind any families into a financial situation that they may not be prepared, of course. And that is, we know college is a very big investment, especially with the cost of it these days. And we want to make sure that we're respecting that as well. But there is a process to that. So we will work with families to see what the best decision may ultimately come down the line. But know that it's, there shouldn't be any fear with being bound to something, at least financial, at least from our policies. But we want to make sure that when you are thinking about ED as best as you can to see if it's going to be a good financial fit. At least at Northeastern, I can say as a note, we do offer early financial reads right before the early decision 1 deadline and the early decision 2 deadline, where you can at least fill out the CSS profile, see what you may be eligible for. So hopefully that may give more confidence in applying through ED. At least that can give you a nice, more accurate answer compared at least to the net price calculator. So those are some resources I think will be good to look into and see if universities offer that. So that way you can have more confidence. And then if down the line, I think at least for financial reasons, we will certainly work with you.
Great, thank you.
And over at UMass, it's pretty simple. We do not have early decisions, so our students are not bound to any decision with us. We only offer EA and regular decisions, so that doesn't really affect any of the financial aid packets.
Yeah, and at Brandeis, it's similar to at Northeastern, where there is a kind of a process that will go through. So you'll work with our Student Financial Services office, kind of go through an appeal process, see what can be done in that regard. And then, that final step would be letting you, again, out of that ED agreement. We don't want to kind of cause trouble for anyone. We also, our Student Financial Services office is really great about talking with students. So if you're considering applying somewhere ED and you're not really sure, reach out to the financial services office at that college or university, kind of talk to them about what that might look like and how closely kind of their financial aid packages reflect that net calculator price.
Awesome. Thank you. On to the next question. How many AP courses are you looking for a future student to have on their transcript or have taken in high school?
I'm happy to start with this one. For us, we have no set number of like a certain number of AP courses that will get you into Brandeis or anything like that. We certainly have students applying from all different schools and backgrounds. So we have students who have AP courses, maybe their school only offers honor courses. We have some schools that are completely unleveled, some schools that are IB, really kind of a bunch of different curriculums. So there really is no standard. More what we want to see is what did your school offer you versus what did you take? So kind of how did you challenge yourself throughout high school? And that doesn't necessarily mean taking all of the highest rigor courses all through your entire experience. It's more thinking about, maybe you really struggled with math one year. So rather than kind of pushing yourself into an AP course in math, you're instead going to focus your energy on an AP English course. So really kind of thinking of your whole schedule and not just the certain number of APs or AP exams that you've taken or anything like that.
Great. Thank you. Soraya, Bella, do you want to join in or?
Yeah, I was going to echo exactly what Lillian said. I think it's really important to emphasize to students that if your school doesn't offer AP courses, you're not going to be penalized for not being able to take AP courses. And then similarly to what Lillian was saying, if you flunked pre-calc, you probably shouldn't take AP calculus, right? Like you might not succeed in that course. So we would rather see you pushing yourself in the courses that you need to be pushed at, but not doing so in a way that you're only taking the classes because you think we want to see AP. And I'm using quotation marks. Again, I'm sorry, my camera isn't working, but everything that Lillian said.
Great.
Yeah, I can echo both. what Lillian and Isabella said, just keep, you know, if you're able to challenge yourself based on what your school has to offer, just keep that in mind. And yeah, I don't want to have to go down the same rabbit hole, but I just really want to reemphasize that. So challenge yourself as best as you can, but we also want to make sure students are am I saying that right? Remembering, you know, work-life balance, of course, like that's something you'll learn, you know, in your older years as well. But I think that's something that should be practiced, self-care. Like we want to make sure that students are remembering that.
Great. Ms. Turner, did you want to jump in?
No, I'm good.
Okay, got it. All right, so next question. So if a student is taking level 4 of a language this year, a number of colleges they're considering recommends but not requires the 4 years of the language for admission. Does this mean 4 years of a language in high school or reaching a level 4 of a language? And would it be okay to switch to another class if that's more in line with what they want to do if they've already reached a level 4?
I can certainly say it would be reaching a level 4. Like it's because I know, yeah, there's some students that start, you know, in a higher level of the language much earlier, and then so it's like, okay, great, it's great to see that you've gotten to that level. Doesn't have to, you didn't have to have spent your entire high school years in a specific language just to spend the amount of years in it. Students are all going to be at different levels, of course, when it comes to that. So and even if you are someone who wants to switch, maybe you did take Spanish 1, 2, and 3 in high school, freshman, sophomore, junior year, and then senior year, you may want to swap the language. We know that's very common, you know, so that is something that is something that we do keep in mind. So it's not abnormal to switch a language out for maybe another elective course. Maybe you want to add a science, you want to add another math course. We understand that is what happens, and some students maybe it will tell us too. It's not super important to tell us, but we can kind of gauge that from the transcript by what your senior class list looks like. But just know that we're pretty intuitive to able to see that that's what you've done. But if you want to let us know, that is also fine as well. Communication will be very important too. So, but yeah, you don't have to have taken Spanish 6, 7, and 8, you know, just because. So no pressure there, but I'll let my colleagues weigh in as well.
Yeah, I would say kind of similarly thinking of not necessarily similar to the previous question about APs, not necessarily forcing yourself to take these classes because you think you need it for a college application. For us at Brandeis, we are really looking at, you know, maybe you do take Spanish for a year or two and then drop it, but you pick up an extra science class. You know, as Zaraya was saying, you're kind of filling in with another academic solid rather than maybe you just get to go home from school early. So again, kind of thinking about how you've challenged yourself throughout high school and how you've really interacted with your courses.
Yeah, same over here at UMass. Our only requirement is that you take 2 years of a language and that language stays the same for those 2 years. Other than that, fill your time with something that might be more enjoyable for you or switch to a different language.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next question. What kind of things make a student stand out or or that you particularly appreciate in a candidate? And that might just be like a personal, you know, thing, but maybe even just specifically for your schools. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So I think it's important first to highlight that at UMass Amherst, we do read holistically. So we're going to be looking at every single piece of your application. We don't just look at test scores if you choose to submit them or GPA. So like you said, it might be kind of a personal opinion. For me, I really think a very well-rounded student, right? You don't need to have an activity list that's 20 pages long. If you spent your weekends babysitting your little siblings, that's important. Put it down. So I think I really appreciate when I see those activities that might not be like quote unquote normal. Like I volunteer at the animal shelter, but I help my mom pay bills and I translate paperwork for her. Those are all really important things. So I really appreciate highlighting those little things that students might not see as an activity. But well-rounded is my final answer.
Thank you.
I'd say the same, well-rounded student. We also read holistically. And yeah, I always felt like the activity sheet should be called activities and responsibilities. Like we want to just understand how you're spending your time outside of school, and still if it's activities within school, activities outside of school, responsibilities, how are you contributing to your school community and broader community? Think of those things on both levels. And yes, exactly as Isabella said, if you've done it, put it down. Your hobbies, we want to hear it all. We really want to understand who you are as a person, who you are academically, and that's all that we're really hoping to see. So yeah, well-rounded student overall, is I can literally say the same.
Yeah, so at Brandeis, we have what we call indicators of success. So 3 things that as we're also reading holistically, we're looking for these kind of 3 factors that we think will help students be successful on campus. It's critical thinking, perseverance of effort, and community engagement. You can feel free to read more about those on our website, but I'll say kind of from my personal perspective, I always really appreciate when a student feels very genuine or very authentic in the application. Our office always likes to tell students, if someone pulled your essay out of the stack of college essays, they should be able to know that it's yours, and really kind of get that feeling of who you are, like if your friend was to pull it out. And so I think carrying your own kind of authentic story, again, trying not to say what you think admissions counselors want to hear, and just being true to kind of your experience so far.
Great. Thank you. I love that. What advice would you give students and families considering community college for a year or 2 before applying to a 4-year college? And in particularly, for example, a student is interested in saving money, building in academic skills, and gaining a work-life experience before committing to the 4-year college.
I can start with this one. So for everyone that is or isn't familiar, at UMass Amherst and all of the UMasses, we absolutely love transfer students. We are a part of Mass Transfer, which is a great opportunity for students who are interested in any of these things. Saving money, you're not so sure what you want to study yet, you want to get work experience. So at UMass, if you uphold, I believe it's a 2.9 GPA at any of the community colleges, you get automatic admissions to any of the UMass campuses. Obviously, that has a few caveats. If you're interested in nursing or Eisenberg, our more competitive schools, that's going to be a little bit different. But for our pretty much general admission majors, it is right around a 2.9 GPA, which is absolutely awesome. So anytime you can save money, we definitely encourage you to do so.
Great.
Yeah, I have a couple quick notes. I mean, we, of course, we have students that are transferring from to Northeastern, and if you are considering community college for a couple of years, honestly, it can be a very great choice, exactly as it's noted about saving money. And I think it's a great time to explore and, yes, really hone in on what it is that you may be interested in academically. I mean, it's almost the same, like your first 2 years, a lot of colleges, you can, for the most part, declare your major by the second semester of your second year. So you're taking that time in another setting where you are able to take a couple of classes, see what you like, see what you don't like. That's really important. I always try to emphasize, see what you don't like. And then if you're going to transfer into a school, because I know at least at Northeastern, when we are looking at transfer applicants, we want to make sure what we really look at, the classes that they've taken where it connects to their major. That is a little different for undergrad, where we don't really admit by major and stuff like that. We'll of course ask you, but it's not a big heavy lift in our consideration. But for transfer, it is a bit. So we do want to see how that has looked over time. So we'll look very closely, but we want to at least get a good sense of what the student is interested in, so that you can hone in on during that period, and then put yourself in a good place to continue that with a 4-year school. So all that is good and keep in mind, but I certainly agree. It's can be a really great choice for saving time and in discovering.
And just to kind of add on to that, I would also say if there's a school, a four-year school that you're really interested in and you're not sure if you want to go to community college first, talk to the admissions counselor at that school, kind of ask them what the transfer process is like, how popular it is for, or not popular, but how common for transfers to enter into that school, and kind of thinking about it from that direction. But also if you have no idea what school you want to go to, and so you're kind of using this opportunity of community college, as Zariah was saying, use it to explore, take courses that you think you might be interested in, and certainly figure out the things that you're not interested in. And again, really have that time to kind of appreciate what you need in that moment before you move on to whatever's next for you.
Great, thank you. And Lillian, I think you probably answered this question, so but you're welcome to chime in again if you want. But do you have any examples of essays that really stood out to you over the years?
I'll share first. Building on what I said earlier, my favorite one so far, a student wrote all about pickles, and they kind of described their love for pickles and how that kind of shapes them, and kind of described their personality through that way. And so I love to share that example because I think when students are picking their essay topic, they feel like it has to be this kind of big, heavy message or this big piece. But I think that one's kind of a silly topic, but they were able to really still be kind of themselves. And we learned a lot about the student through the essay.
That's great.
I had one in the past where she wrote about an Airbnb she wanted to open. And she talked all about the setting and how she wouldn't allow any Wi-Fi, because she really wanted the people staying there to really have the opportunity to disconnect. So it kind of I was reading it and I was imagining, as I was reading along with her writing. And that was one that did really stand out. She did start off the essay with good evening, and it was very much the morning for me. And I was like, oh. But I was like, I'm like, okay, what are we in for? So it was really nice to just hear how she described, how she would decorate the home. And so I did learn a lot about, her creativity, what she's interested in and all of that. And then she also just tied it together with wanting to disconnect, spend time with loved ones, all that. And that's something that she really enjoys doing. And it was easy to read as well. I always say, as long as it's easy to read, I don't have to go back and check, and I'm trying to understand your transitions. I think even as a baseline, it's nice, easy to read. It's clear, concise. You get to the point early on and then you kind of wrap it up. That's really, really great. But at least topic wise, that was one that was very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a specific essay in general. I knew we read so many. So just to give you all some advice or things that I have found useful when reading our applications and helping students with essays, going off again what Lillian said, don't feel like you need to write about something super traumatic or super personal unless you want to. I think social media has kind of made teenagers think that they need to write about something really traumatic, and that is not the case. You can write about pickles, you can write about an Airbnb, you can write about your mom, your sister. But the most important thing, I think, is making sure that you tie in whatever you do choose to write about back to yourself, because at the end of the day, we're admitting you to college and we love to read about grandma or your uncle or your mom or your dog, but we're admitting you. So the world is your oyster. Write about whatever you want, but make sure to tie it back into you.
Great. Thank you. I love that, pickles. For each of you, is demonstrated interest, like touring campus and going to webinars, something that you consider in the application process?
I can go because ours is very short and sweet. No, we do not track demonstrated interest at UMass Amherst.
At Northeastern, we track it for our own, to make sure we understand that you've attended and everything like that. But when it comes to the application process, I think when it comes to demonstrated interest, let me rewind. How you interact with the university is what we I would say like to see, but when it comes to sending messages to admission counselors and everything, we're not tracking any of that where we're like, oh, how many times has a student emailed me or interacted with me? We always say it's not how you interact with us, yes, it's how you interact with the university, how you've been doing your research, as in like, on the website, virtual tour, in-person visit, whatever it may be. That's what we're, looking to see. But how heavily it weighs within our application process, it is not as heavy as it may be for other institutions. So know that we track it. It's there, but it does not have a big weight when it comes to any decisioning. We, again, keep the holistic review, rigor, all the parts of our application. Will kind of tie those all together. But it is not a big decision maker for us.
Yeah, similar. We do track demonstrated interest, so coming to tour campus, but also virtual opportunities. So not just for Brandeis, but for any of the schools that you're looking at, really think about connecting that way, whether or not they track demonstrated just to get more information, but a great resource.
Great, thank you. Since the pandemic, have there been things that have become more or less important in your application process review? I mean, I think we all know SAT, ACT is definitely something that we've seen shift, but any other things that become more or less important?
I can go. I don't really think so. So I'll reiterate the holistic review at UMass Amherst. I really think it's important to remember that every piece of the application matters. And I know students hate when I repeat that over and over again, but it's true. Your supplementals are useful. Your essay is useful. We like to see your activities. So don't let anything slip under the rug, because we actually do sit there and read every single page of the application. But yeah, test optional for UMass Amherst, but it's all important.
Yeah,
It's
I echo Isabella's thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay if the answer is no. Just curious. All right. Does your school recalculate GPAs or give credit for upper level classes if we only have an unweighted GPA?
Northeastern recalculates GPAs. And we do give credit for upper level, so honors and then any advanced level courses, of course, AP. So yeah, we'll create our own GPA. When we do recalculate, it's not far off really from any GPA that's already reported from the high school. So we're never going to be anything drastically different, but we do recalculate and give credit.
Brandeis does look at unweighted GPA as well. But yeah, considering, again, the rigor of the courses that you took throughout your time in high school.
And yeah, we do. We recalculate everything.
Great. Thank you. And then we had a couple questions come in that are not on here, just through the chat in listening to you all. So I'm just gonna pop over here real quick. If you could only pick optimizing one grades, scores, activities, which would you pick?
That's a really hard one. I don't know. I can go with you guys.
It kind of goes against the holistic approach, right?
Yeah, I feel like if we're going like not considering holistic or review, just doing like an opinion as like a blunt question, I guess your grades show a lot about a student, right? Because you're taking classes like math, PE, language, art, ceramics. So we're still kind of seeing a lot of different facets of your personality, right? But I think I can speak for all of us that I think parents and students really want that blunt answer of like, so which one is most important? I promise you, it all matters. Like, that's why we say it so many times. We really do look at the application from a holistic approach, because you don't know if a student is working 12 hours after school every week, right? That's why it's so important to look at all of these different sections. So if that was a parent that asked the question or a student, they're all really important. And that might not be the answer that you want, but it is, I promise. I don't know if anyone else has anything to echo off of that, but at least at UMass, everything is equally as important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying the same thing basically. I'm really transparent where I'm like, academics is still the most important, and then I say activities and responsibilities are like right underneath it, literally right underneath it, because that's where we want the well-rounded student. But I am not looking at my list and seeing, very high achieving student, but a student that's not involved in any sense, then that's not, we're not seeing a good result for that student. I'll be very honest. Like I have looked past some of those students because I'm thinking about what they'll take advantage of when they come to Northeastern or just come to college in general. What makes, at least we'll talk about Northeastern, and what makes NUS is how involved our students are and how they take initiative in any sense. Not like in starting clubs or just joining and becoming a part of the community. Those are all things that we're looking for students to do. Just really engulf yourself here. So, I was to say academics, like you're here for the education. Obviously, that's the majority of your time. And then everything else kind of encapsulates it and really draws to the rest of your experience. But I always go like that. Like that's kind of how I always view it. But yeah, academics I'll say is most important. And then right after that is everything else.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what's already been said, we want you to be successful in our classrooms, so we really value that academics. But we're also looking at all of our applicants as potential future community members. So really every kind of aspect of that application is important. So as Isabella said, might not be the answer you want, but we really do look at everything.
Great, thank you. Have you found, maybe for each of your schools, that students are more likely to get accepted through early decision or early action, like your percentages in that way?
I can start. We do have a slightly higher acceptance rate for our early decision 1 and 2 students. If you just kind of think about the pools that you're applying in, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the acceptance rates are much different. At least for us, we have 4 decision rounds. Early action is where we get the most amount of students or the bulk of our applications. And then regular decision, I always recommend if you think, you want to apply to Northeastern and you are maybe not able to do early decision 1 or 2, always recommend early action if you can. But then, also good to consider if you are wanting the university to see, more of senior year grades. That's also something you should certainly think about. And that is a decision you can certainly make for yourself and also consult too. But that is something you can consider as well. But EA and regular decision usually have the same acceptance rates. And then yes, early decision 1 and 2 will have a higher rate because it's less amount of applications in those pools.
Same for us. Yeah. EA is usually more and then RD less.
Great, thank you. 2 more. Is it reasonable to assume that the median average test score for accepted students at test optional schools are likely exaggerated, given that the only students with the better scores will be reporting that?
And maybe I'd add, like, because we've seen this over the last few years, more so because if they're only reporting, in that middle 50%, it's just going to keep increasing.
That is a tough one. It makes sense. Like, yes, that's at least from my knowledge of, kind of how that all works too. That may even be a little bit above me, but yeah, that does, when you think about it, yes, you know what I mean? Because it is tough where we do see a student who has submitted lower scores. Every other aspect of them, their regular transcript is, up to par, but it's hard, at least for Northeastern, we can't look away from those scores and may not move forward with a positive decision for that student. And sometimes that is what's tough. When I am going through selection and I'm like, oh my goodness, if we just didn't, submit, and that's, at least for us, that's kind of what it does come down to. And some of those are some really difficult decisions that we had to make.
Yeah, same for UMass. I do want to just highlight something with test optional because I think this causes a lot of stress for students. At least for UMass Amherst, the majority of our applicants are not submitting test scores. So even if you are a student that you have a relatively high test score, but you still don't want to submit it, you don't have to. My bottom line piece of advice is if the test score is going to positively impact your overall academic profile, submit it. if you took your ACT like me and was really embarrassed to tell anyone about it ever, you don't have to submit it. But at UMass, again, majority of our students are not submitting test scores and they are still performing amazing across all their academics. So hopefully that eases a little anxiety with test scores.
Krista, do you mind if I interject right now? Because that was a little bit Naviance related. That's something that I've been thinking about lately too, with when we look at the scattergrams. And that's why I said earlier also, like one of the things I appreciate the most with Naviance is looking at the bar graphs rather than the scattergrams, because the bar graphs will just tell you the overall numbers of students who got in. Whereas when you're looking at the graph, I mean, students who haven't taken any standardized tests, their little like circle with a face won't even appear on there. So, yes, there's a gazillion different ways to look at all this stuff. And I think that this is a really interesting question and something that Naviance might need to look at shifting at some point in the future. But I just recommend for families to look at the graphs a little bit more than the scattergrams. That's my input.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Yep.
All right, I'm being cognizant of time here too. We have one last question for our reps, and then the three of us will stay on and answer some of the other questions that have come through. But if you had one piece of parting advice to juniors applying to college, what would it be?
I can go. So I really like to emphasize this for juniors because I was definitely very type A and made my whole life about applying to college. So really try and get organized now, and then remember to enjoy your senior year because it's going to fly by, and then all of a sudden you're in college and you're going to wonder like, oh my gosh, I stressed so much and now I'm here. So definitely take it in, get organized so you're not scrambling next year. And then for parents out there, also relax. It's all going to work out, especially if you guys are here joining these calls now. Like it means that you want to be prepared, right? So hopefully everyone can relax, enjoy senior year, enjoy your summer. But yeah, that's my advice.
I would definitely agree with that. Take a breather, kind of give yourself grace. I think going through this process, students put a lot of pressure on themselves, whether it's from themselves or from what they think their family wants them to do, or their friends, or schools that students from your high school have gone to in the past that seem really rigorous and have these reputations. I think really focus on what you need from the school. You're going to be spending, possibly 4 years at this next school. So think about, again, community that you're joining, academics, what it's going to look like, and how that's really going to feel for your experience. You're the one that's going to be going through the college admissions process, but also actually attending the school. So really listening to kind of what speaks to you.
And I think, because I would honestly say the same that Lily and Isabella said, because I'm always like, stay on top of the process as best as you can. Especially when it comes, because every college we all ask for different things, and it can be complicated, and you can get confused of who wants what, who's test optional, who requires a supplement, who doesn't. That can get very stressful, and I think staying on top of that process is going to be the best. And if you can, and this is not anything advanced, like we'll Excel, just all the colleges at the top, the requirements, and then, just kind of filling in the blanks with X's, yeses, or no's, whatever it is. That can really help visually. No pivot tables, no formulas, just the, very easy stuff. But I also want to know too, if you are looking to see if a college can be a good home away from home for you, of course, visiting in person, if you can, is a great option, as you can connect with the community. But then if you are unable to, of course, we have the virtual office. But I also say, social media, where you have Instagram. I think a lot these days, especially after COVID, colleges have done a lot with posting, online, on Instagram. Especially clubs and orgs have so many of their own Instagram pages, so you can get a glimpse of what, how engaged students are with the community. What the hot news is, on campus. So I think while you're scrolling, maybe before bed or something like that, that's something that you can also do, is check out, the different pages that universities have. I think they've become so much more engaged, and students are so much more outspoken, just sharing their experience. And I think no better way to get it than from, the students themselves. So Also, my last quick note, this reminded me, if a university has an opportunity, like through the admissions office, for you to connect directly with their tour guides, I think that's also a great option. Northeastern, we have, I think we call it Ask a Husky. So sending a quick email, you can say, hey, I wanted to connect with maybe a student who's a bio major, I just want to get more insight. I think that's a good way to get some information and to connect with someone as well. So I think maybe make a new friend. So that's also something that you can do right now, to kind of get a glimpse of what life is like more on the inside too.
Great. Thank you all. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight, and all of the insight you provided. We are going to hang on. You guys are welcome to stay, but we also know your time is valuable, and
Thank
you're
you
welcome.
so much for joining.
Yeah, really appreciate
Of
it.
course.
Thank
Um,
you.
And like I mentioned, Ms. Ross, Ms. Turner, and I will stay on just to answer some of the other questions that have popped up and come through. But yes, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks for
take care.
having us.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So we've been kind of making note of the questions that have been popping through. We separated them into having the reps answer a few of them. Some of them were answered through those. So we're gonna just pop into the ones that weren't. So I'll just start with one, and then some of my colleagues can kind of take over. But one of the questions that popped up was, about recommendation letters and when students should start asking for those letters of recommendation. As we mentioned, we're going to be going into their biology classes next week, and that's something we're going to start talking with them about. We really want them to be super thoughtful about who they're asking. As Ms. Turner had mentioned, we want to make sure that they're asking teachers that they feel comfortable with, and that they're not asking too many teachers. Every student is asking teachers, so we just want to make sure that every student is getting an opportunity to get a letter from a teacher. So once your student has really thought about who they want to ask and given a lot of thought to that, we encourage them to ask, usually March, April time. Some teachers like to write them over the summer. Some teachers will say, yep, I'll put your name on my list and I'm going to do them in the fall, right? They all kind of have different timelines on what they're doing when they're doing them. But out of respect, we always ask at least for a verbal ask from the student, usually around March and April, and then a follow-up before the end of the year. And then when we get back in the fall, another follow-up.
I can take up.
Yeah, you can take one. I'm toggling.
There was one question that had come in earlier that was asking about dual enrollment. Dual enrollment is something that all Massachusetts public high schools technically offer. If a student is interested in dual enrollment, they would need to reach out to the college or university that you're looking to take the class at. Any of the community colleges offer it, and they have their own little application that you fill out. So for instance, like Middlesex has an application you fill out. They do offer a discounted rate for classes to high school students. And then in addition, there is typically a GPA minimum requirement. I think for Middlesex, it was 2.0. Some of them might be higher, might be a 2.9. And then the process that you have to go through, you have to get permission from the principal, from Mr. Taylor. So if the student is interested, they would reach out to the guidance counselor and we would help guide you through that process. We take care of the stuff on this end as far as if it gets approved through the high school, what's the course that you're interested in. But the community colleges have specific requirements. You can't just take any class. It would typically be an introductory level class, and there could be some other requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Turner.
Oh, and timeline. I didn't say timeline. The one that I was looking at, I think they had like a June 1st was one of the application deadlines. But again, it may differ depending on which community college you're looking at.
Another question that came in was in regards to the role of the guidance counselor at BHS through this process. And so I think, we've shared a lot about that over the course of the presentation. But ultimately, I think, we're here to support you and your student through this process, no matter what that looks like. And so we are here to meet with you. We are here to share resources with you. When it comes time for like submitting materials to the colleges, we'll talk more about this. We'll have a senior parent night in the fall, in which we'll talk more about like the specific roles of sending specific materials and that sort of thing with you all. But for just for sake of sharing the information a little bit now, we do send transcripts, our letters of recommendation, school reports, that sort of stuff. Students are responsible for their applications and working with their teachers for letters of recommendation through their teachers. And again, a lot of that is all of that is done through Naviance, which is why we introduce it now, so that you can start to get familiar with the program and know how to use it for when it comes time for that.
And I was typing because I was just writing down another question that just came in, but did you add to the, in terms of like when a student develops like a list of schools, we're happy to give feedback to in terms of like, is this one a likely, a reach in the middle too?
Yeah.
Stacey, you want to take one?
I'm not sure if I'm.
Didn't see him. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
well, yeah, throw one at me and I'll do it. I just am having a hard time seeing in the.
Okay, I'll throw it at you. How many reference letters are required for college applications? And can they also take a letter from an internship or a mentor or someone else outside?
It depends on the college. So that's part of the search process and the information finding for your student to do is to look at how many recommendations each school needs. Our recommendation is to ask 2 teachers, because typically most schools will want 2 teacher recommendations. We automatically will do a guidance recommendation and send that. And that all goes through the school. If the school will take more than 2 recommendations, then your student is more than welcome to ask like a coach or like an employee to write a recommendation as well. And there's another process for getting those sent. And again, we'll go over that and the logistics in September.
Okay. Another one that came in was, do we support international applicants and what is our experience? So we are definitely seeing more and more students apply to international schools, I would say over the last few years. And, we collaborate. We are not familiar with every single international school. We definitely will go to each other if, we have questions that we've heard of. The students sometimes, obviously will know more if they've already visited, that particular school. The UCAS system is one we are more familiar with. For instance, they require one, they call it I keep forgetting the name of this, but referee. They call it referee. And your letter has to be, it's kind of a combination of some information that a guidance counselor may put in their letter, but they also want specific information about the particular program the student is applying to, and they want to know what have they done in relation to, if it's psychology, that program, what classes might they have taken or activities that are related. So we try to reach out to the teachers and have the teachers that wrote their traditional recommendation letters get some of that information and compile it together. They also ask for predicted grades and predicted AP scores, and that's something else that we have to put into that letter. So for any student that is going that route as far as the UCAS one, we definitely need a little bit more time to set that all up. We can't quite turn that over quite as quickly. We need their UCAS ID. So there are some that are more, that we're a little bit more familiar with. We're happy to learn. I've started a document, each year as I learn about more and more international schools, kind of putting together what's needed, what's not. A lot of them also have a lot of self-reporting. So the student actually has to upload a lot of information. So I would say, yes, we are happy to support our students applying to international schools. There are some we know quite a bit about, and some we are, continuing to learn. And anyone want to add anything, feel free.
I think you got it.
Yeah.
I can tackle two right here really quickly. One student came in about the March SAT and wondering whether or not it is full. If you were unable to register or find BHS as a testing site, that is likely the case. It probably means that the testing site is full. And so we just encourage students to test at a surrounding community, whether that's Arlington, Watertown, Waltham, Cambridge, that sort of thing. The other question that came through much earlier on, and maybe even prior to through the form that was sent, was, will my fourth quarter grades, my 4 quarter grades, midterm exam, final exam grades for junior year be sent to the colleges on my transcript, or will it be just my final grades? And what about senior year? It's a really great question. So when the transcript gets sent to the colleges for students, it just has from 9th to 11th grade, it's only the final grade. So it will have the course the student took, the level at which they took it at, and then the final grade that they've gotten for each class from grades 9 to 11. And then in the senior year, it will have depending on the, so that's the tricky part. It's depending on the deadline that the student has, right? So if you have an October 15th deadline, that is typically before the end of the first quarter, most often. And so they may not see the first quarter grades for senior year. They will see the courses you're taking, but not necessarily the grades. November 1st and 15th, it's kind of tricky. Sometimes schools, if you're a student that they're feeling might be on that line and they really want to see those first quarter grades, sometimes they will hold off and wait to see those first quarter grades to read. Others may not. So it's just really school dependent. But as the grades are released, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have an earlier grade close for senior year for first quarter for seniors. And so that would help kind of with that process so that schools could see their first quarter grades. But quarter grades are only shown for senior year. And then in that case, it's only for the schools that they're applying to. It says first quarter, sometimes those mid-year reports as well. If students still have not heard back from schools will probably want to see those mid-year reports as well. So that kind of answers that question a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to share just something that one of our listeners shared that I think is great information to get out there. And they said that one financial option for those willing to serve 4 years in the military post-graduation is ROTC programs. There are lots of different schools you can inquire about the different ROTC programs. This particular resident shared that their students' annual tuition was $60,000 at an Ivy League school. It was fully covered. And when they finished, they were to serve 4 years in the Space Force in Colorado Springs, where they got lots of leadership training. So it's another option that some students may, really find, obviously a great financial advantage as well as additional skills. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. There is a question also of, does Learning Center go into the transcript and GPA? Yes, it does. It is a 5-credit course, just like every other course, and so that does get factored in.
Another one on here is, does being a non-U.S. citizen affect my applications to U.S. schools? Will they be considered an international student, and how does that affect their applications and the application process? So yes, they would be applying as an international student, but their transcript is from, obviously, Belmont High School, but it does get reviewed as an international student, but they are going to take into consideration that they attended a U.S. school. So it's a little bit, they're looking at the whole thing, but yes, and you have to, there's different visa statuses that have to do with different things. You'd want to reach out specifically to that individual school for that.
Another question that came in is, when is the last time or a point that a senior can get a final SAT test, considering the application timelines? I think it's very dependent upon when that deadline is. I would say for most early deadlines, August is really that time period of the last test. There is an October test. Did they implement a September test too? Did I hear? Yeah. So September and October, again, BHS is not always a testing site for those specific dates, so you would maybe need to take them in other locations. But if you have a November 1st deadline, I would say that September, maybe October test, you could get away with it. with self-reporting that those scores, if they came back and they were what you would want to send to the school. But really October, if it's an early, if you're going regular decision to some schools, you'd really have that October and November timeline to take again, just to try to bring those scores up if you wanted to.
There's a more detailed question that I don't have the exact answer to, but I will read it. Is it true that I don't have our average? Do you know our average SAT is not our profile? It's not on our.
I think it is.
And I think it's also dependent like year to year. So we break it down like for each year. So we wouldn't have that data specifically for this class.
The SAT, Belmont High School does have a higher than national average SAT by a whole bunch, definitely. That's true. We don't have the exact average though. And then another question was, are the Boston area universities requiring over a 1400? No, they're not necessarily requiring over a 1400 for SAT scores. Obviously, there are some that middle 50%, it's possible, obviously at the Ivies that it may be that high for the students that when it was test optional, if we're submitting, they're going to be higher. And then the other part of it, what are the top 5 schools that most of the BHS students are admitted to for college? So when we were trying to decide who to invite to our admissions rep, I dug into that data a little bit. And the 3 schools that we had here are definitely 3 in the top as far as accepting our students. So Northeastern, UMass Amherst, and Brandeis. Some other ones that I would say, I don't have the exact top 5, but some other ones, that do accept a fair number of our students that we reached out to, are like, I have the most popular ones that our students applied to. I can share that if anyone thinks that they want to hear some of those. But like New York University, Providence College, Bentley, other ones were on that list. I had everybody vote on. They're definitely up there as far as top ones that a lot of our students apply to. In addition to what's been named, Boston University, Tufts, Boston College, University of Vermont, UMass Lowell, Harvard, Brown, University of Michigan, Cornell, UMass Boston, UConn, WPI, UNH, Syracuse, Dartmouth, in addition to the ones that we mentioned and our reps that were here. Those are definitely in the top 20. Oh, you're muted, Krista.
Thank you. I think also just to kind of dovetail on that a little bit, as far as what the specific question was, I think it's important to remember what the reps shared with us today, and that, your test score, like a 1400 on the SAT is a very good test, a very good score. And it might not be that median range like Ms. Turner was talking about, but that's why it's important to heed the advice of the admissions reps, right? Because you want to make sure that it's really highlighting your academic profile. And that some students with wonderful scores are just not submitting them. So I think it's just really important. And maybe this is a great spot. We've answered most of the questions to kind of wrap things up a little bit, but that's why it's important for us to meet with your students and to meet with you to kind of talk about your own specific student's plan. Because I think a lot of the questions are very, dependent on the student, the schools that they're thinking about applying to, and kind of what their timeline is going to be for everything. And so on that note, if you guys have anything else you want to say, I think we just want to thank you all for coming tonight and being here with us.
We look forward to working with you and your student and are happy to answer any questions. And again, we will post the recording and some other documents, including the slide deck, to the website as well.
Have a great evening.
Attending. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.